So today, the title of today's session is Social Identities in the Workplace. First, I'm going to go over the agenda, and then I'll make a few announcements. So first, after this, we're gonna dive into our social identity activity. After that, we'll do our youth choice workshops. The options for today are code switching as well as power and privilege. And then we'll go into lunch, and then we will do a reflection. So just some announcements for the next few weeks. Next week, you're gonna wanna bring your laptops because we're gonna be doing an activity as well as brainstorming a job that you might like to apply for. So those are the two things that you need to remember for next week. You can write them down. We'll send a reminder email, but please bring your laptops and have a job in mind that you would like to apply for because we're gonna work on applying for those. So next week, the title of next week is actually Career Sneak Peek. That is why we're doing the career workshops. And then also, we need you guys to RSVP for the end of summer celebration if you want to attend. I believe the RSVP date for that is August 8th. So just keep that in mind. Okay, and now I will pass it off to Olivia.
Good morning, everybody. So I just wanted to kind of open up the conversational space here for us today. Today we're talking about social identities, which are a major way that we interact with the world and our jobs, each other, our relationships, and they can structure our very interactions in society. So I want to kind of, mark how important the topic is, and at the same time, say we all have a different level of familiarity and comfort with the topic. We hope that you will treat this as a brave space to explore this important but sometimes sensitive and difficult topic. And I also want to make sure that we are treating each other with respect and maintaining our community norms around SummerWorks as a confidential space. And wanted to know if there's any sort of additional guidelines that people and participants would like to add to our list so that you have what you need in order to participate in this session today. Yeah, Allison.
Don't fight back. Don't fight back someone else's comment.
Definitely. So respect each other's experiences.
Critique what the person says, not the person.
Absolutely. Excellent.
Respect people's experiences.
My name is Haley. Is it on? Yeah. Okay, I can't tell. What is said here stays here.
Yeah, definitely. So we do record the sessions, but we will cut out the discussion from today's piece before we post it. So what is said here will stay here and will not make its way online. Definitely. Okay, awesome. So please respect each other, each other's experiences. Make sure if you're critiquing ideas and not people, and respect everybody's contributions, their experiences, and the ways that they interact with the world. And we should be able to have a great discussion today. And I will hand it off to Jordan.
Awesome. Thank you, Olivia. So as we've kind of discussed, today we're going over social identities. So first, I actually want to kind of pass it back off to you guys and just say, what does the term social identity mean? Or what are some examples of social identities? Does anyone want to share what they think? It's okay if you're not quite sure. Yes, we have one right here, Evie.
Hello, my name is Evie, and to me, social identities mean identities formed based off of social structures. So, for example, like gender. Let's see, what are some other things? Race. But just because these are social identities and they're based off of social structures, that doesn't mean that these identities aren't real. In terms of like the struggles that they face and such.
Yeah, absolutely. That was great. That was a great definition. And I really like that you highlighted that just because it's, socially constructed doesn't mean it's any less real or invalidating those experiences of that person. That's great. So thank you. Does anyone else want to share before we kind of go on? Any other thoughts or examples you want to provide? Oh, yes. Awesome.
I would say that social identities are identifying factors that wouldn't exist outside the society that they're currently in. So if you took that person and put them somewhere else, they wouldn't necessarily identify as that.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great
Micah,
point.
right?
I was going to say, yeah, that's a great point, Micah. It definitely depends, when we're talking about the social component of it, we think about these norms and this kind of culture we have built and how that, is so variable across different places. And so, like you said, what might be one identity in one place can be totally different somewhere else. So, that's a really good thing to think about when we talk about this as well, because they can always be changing. It's not something that's fixed, and it is dependent on you and your experiences. Does anyone else have anything they want to add? Yeah, absolutely, Reese.
Social identity is an identity shared by a group of people with similar characteristics.
Yeah.
Like the identity.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know. The mic is a little quiet, but she said it's a group of people who have shared characteristics or identities, right?
It's identity shared by a group of people.
Through people. Thank you for that. Sorry, I apologize. Yes, that is great. Identity shared through people. I like how you phrase that, Reese. Does it? An identity shared by a group of people. Yep. Anyone else have anything they want to add? No? Okay. We'll have more discussion later. So if you have thoughts that come up or anything, definitely jot those down because we'll have a lot more conversations today. But those were some great examples and definitions and stuff to get us started. So just diving in a little bit more. So social identity, kind of like the word implies, is socially constructed. So this means that it is based on like the environment around us and kind of those different social components, culture, norms, like we said. And it is, something that can vary, kind of like Micah pointed out. So this is something that can be claimed or assigned. So when we say this, claimed is kind of you taking that ownership and saying, yes, this is an identity that I claim or reflects me. Where if it's assigned, it might be something that's kind of placed on you. So there's a little bit of variability in that. And just because it is assigned doesn't mean it is correct. So that is kind of one of those things that we'll talk about that is kind of hard with social identity. It can be clear or unclear, which is another challenging part of this. And as I'm sure many of you know, but it's something that, is so evolving and different based on where you're at and your perspective and your experiences, that your identities might be well defined with a group, or you might have, intersectionality, which is this idea that you identify with, multiple identities and groups. And so you're not just ascribing to, one different place, but a lot. And so it is sometimes hard to navigate that, and it can kind of be unclear. But hopefully through the conversations today, you'll be able to kind of see that. When we think of social identities, it's also important to know that they inform our perceptions of others. So identities are something that we unintentionally or maybe intentionally have biases, thoughts, and that might reflect and how we perceive others. And so it's really important to be conscious of kind of that conversation and how you are incorporating an identity with how you perceive someone and interact with them. And then lastly, I think, we're all familiar with this, but social identities may or may not align with how we personally identify, and that's totally, yes, bless you, may or may not totally align with how we personally identify. So obviously what mine is going to be different than what, maybe Kirsten or Micah or Kathleen or Allison is going to be. And so that's totally okay. It's important to recognize that other people have these identities and experiences that make up their, person compared to you. And so we need to think through the lens of, okay, how did their social identities, build up them and that interaction with you and your social identities. So does anyone have anything they want to add about social identities before I dive into some definitions and examples? Or any questions? Okay, awesome. Just wanted to check because I know this is a lot. So we are going to be doing a worksheet next. So you will get like a list of these with definitions, but we're quickly going to run through some different social identity groups and share different identities. So if you're familiar with this or you have anything that you'd like to add on, please feel free to interrupt me, or if you have questions, but we'll go through this and then we will hop into an activity with this. So I believe, as Evie mentioned, one example of a social identity is race. And so this refers to a group of persons related by common descent or heredity. It's understood by most people as a mixture of like physical, behavioral, and cultural attributes. And this is something that does not change. So your race is something that is assigned to you. It is... Oh, are we passing out the worksheets? Oh, sorry. Okay. Sorry about that. So this is something that is going to be like assigned to you. It doesn't change. And examples of these are Black, Latinx, Asian, white. So this is, for me, I was born white. I will always be that way. So fixed, kind of like we talked about. And then next is ethnicity. So I know that this can be kind of hard, like the difference between race and ethnicity. But when we think of ethnicity, we are referring to a group of persons related by like language, nationality, culture, and or religion. So this is going to be much more of like a cultural thing rather than those like physical attributes. So examples, Irish, Jewish, European American. So this is a little bit different than race because it may or may not be assigned to you based on that culture and your environment. So there's a lot more, variability and lack of clarity as we kind of talked about in some of those. But that's going to be the difference between race and ethnicity. Before I move on, does anyone have any questions about the difference between those two? No? All good? Awesome. So then next is socioeconomic status, abbreviated, you might see it as SES. And this is like your social standing of like, or your class or group that you are kind of assigned within society. And it's often measured by your combination of like education, income, and occupation. So this kind of looks at all three factors and says, okay, where do they fall kind of on the grand scheme of things compared to a lot of other individuals on that range of kind of welfare in life. So this is something that clearly can kind of change, education as you maybe pursue secondary education, whether that's college, trade school, or something like that, that might shift you. Your income might change with jobs, and then obviously you're going to have numerous occupations throughout your life. And so this is something that will kind of be fluid over time. One thing to note is that being a higher socioeconomic status comes with oftentimes more resources and privilege. So, if you have more education, if you have more income, if you are someone who has maybe a higher level job, this is going to afford you more opportunities. And this is something that, is afforded to certain groups or identities more often than others, and that's something that we'll kind of discuss more as we get into the activities. And then the last thing is socioeconomic status is obviously kind of a mouthful. So a lot of times you'll see this listed as your social class, kind of more simply put, but that's just another term if you ever come across it. Anyone have any questions? I just want to make sure we're all good on these since we're going to be doing an activity next. Awesome. Okay, so then we have sex and gender that we're going to kind of distinguish between. So this is another one that is sometimes confusing. So when we think of sex, this is your sex assigned at birth, or it's your anatomy, hormones, and chromosomes. So this is going to be like your physical attributes that determine. So this is going to be like whether you're typically male or female. And so that is what defines sex from gender, which is an identity that is your internal sense of yourself as a man, woman, some sort of combination or neither. So this is, for example, being cisgender, transgender, non-binary. So this is something that is more fluid. It's not assigned to you. This is something that you internally feel and kind of are, ascribing to. So, so cisgender is going to be someone who is like straight. So you are heterosexual. Yes. Can you say that again?
Cisgender, it means you're not trans. It refers to your gender is the same as the sex you were assigned at
Oh,
birth.
thank you for that clarification, Reese. And if anyone has clarifications, please correct me. This is a good space for that. And
This
I'm
stuff is
always
very
learning.
complicated.
Yes, yes. So does anyone have questions about the difference between gender and sex? Or anything else that they'd like to add about that? Yes, Kathleen.
I'm just going to also put this out there. So on your form, you can, the worksheet we handed out, that woman and man are typically gender, and then female and male refer to your sex. So
Yes.
biological versus gender. So that can also be an important distinction for a lot of people. And, when you're filling out forms and stuff, that's something that I think about too, like whether they're asking for your gender or your sex. So those distinctions as well.
Right, absolutely. That's a great point. And you might even start to notice after this conversation that sometimes forums use those terms kind of incorrectly or interchangeably. So definitely kind of be on the lookout for that if you it's something that you want to share. Tabitha? Yeah, go for it.
So another thing about these, if you feel like you don't identify with these or these make you uncomfortable, so it's totally worth noting that these terms and these social constructs were created in this system that can be really oppressive to people or be really confining to people. So if that's something that you're feeling, that's completely valid. And if you want to speak that out, we're so happy to talk about that. Or if it's something that you need to just take a second to yourself, definitely take care of yourself. But these are not only complicated, they can be emotional topics as well. So I just wanted to speak that out.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much for adding that, Tabitha. So then kind of building off this is sexual orientation. So then we look at that. We are thinking about a person's physical, romantic, emotional, aesthetic, and or other form of attraction to others. So this is who you may or may not be attracted to, whether you are or not. And this can be fluid or it can be fixed. So again, this is something that you might know immediately, and that's just how you remain. But for some people, it changes over time based on their, experiences, social identities, etc. And so this is, again, one of those that is not going to necessarily stay stagnant for you. Does anyone have any questions or anything that they want to add about that? No? Okay. And then the last one is persons with disability. So this is a physical or mental condition that may limit a person's movement, senses, or activities. And so this is just, one identity. It can definitely be more specific within this context, but just kind of more broadly defined. This is what we think of or kind of define it when we think of a person with a disability. So that is kind of, well, I guess, does anyone have anything that they'd like to add to that one before I move on? Or any questions? No? Okay, awesome. So I know that was a lot all at once. So hopefully you retained some of it, but if not, you should have those definitions right in front of you. And so with that, I am going to pass it off to Kathleen and Kirsten to take you through that worksheet now so we can have some of those discussions that we talked about.
All right, so we are going to start by passing these out. And so we're going to give you all about 10 minutes to work on this independently. So it will just be up to you to kind of work your way through it. We'll give some time reminders, and then we're going to bring it back to conversations with small groups. But, just take your time to work through the worksheet. So essentially, it's a social identity inventory. And so on the far left-hand column, it gives different types of social identities. And so you can take a moment to reflect on your own identities and how you identify. And then if you filled it all out, you can continue down the columns and start thinking about the questions that we're going to talk about as a group. But we'll give you all about 10 minutes or so. All right, so what we're gonna do now is you're gonna, again, just kind of take some personal time to reflect. If you wanna share with others, you're more than welcome to do that, but you can also do this independently. But you're gonna start moving across the different columns, and you can put X's next to things that you identify. So for example, the first column is you are most aware of. And so for me, you can take this in a couple of different ways. You can take this in a general sense. If you specifically want to think about within this program or at your internship, that might be something to consider too. But for me, personally, something that I think a lot about is my gender and also my age at this point in my life. It's something I think about a lot. So I would put X's next to those two things. And then something you think least about, and again, this is personal to me, but, I don't have any tribal or indigenous affiliation, so that's definitely something that I personally do not think about. And also my nation of origin or citizenship. I'm not in a lot of spaces where that's something that I personally have to think about a lot, so it would be something that I don't think about. So I would put an X next to that. So you're just kind of going to move through the columns and take some time to reflect on these questions and, how your identities relate to that. And again, it's up to you on the context if you want to do it at your internship or at SummerWorks or in general, whatever you want to do. Are there any questions about this? Okay. All right. I know some people are still working on this, and if you are, that's totally okay. But I do know there are some people who are done. So I'm just going to move us to the next step. So if you want to find a partner, or if you want, you can talk as a table. But you're going to, talk in a small group about these questions we have up here. So what identity do you notice about others first? What identity are you most comfortable sharing with other people? And again, these questions are all optional. You don't have to talk about them, but if you feel comfortable sharing with this group, maybe an identity that you are least comfortable sharing. And again, that's kind of contradictory, but this is a safe space, and we want you to be able to talk about things. So something to consider, but you can talk in pairs or small groups about these questions up here.
Okay, I hear you guys having a lot of really great conversations. Please keep that up. Here are some more questions for you to think over and discuss if you're comfortable and if you would like to. So which identity is the most important to you? Which identity is the least important to you? Which identity do you feel least comfortable with at work? And which identity do you see yourself having the most effect on your interaction with your coworkers or your experience at work? And so just a few more minutes to discuss this, and then we'll come back together and you'll have an opportunity to share out if you would like to. Okay, let's bring it back in. Thank you all for engaging in our brave space and sharing about yourself with those at your table. We do want to take some time to just open the floor. You all thought about a lot of questions just now, and so if there's anything you feel comfortable sharing or was dying to share, we want to hear it.
Also, even if it was just about the activity itself, like, how did it feel to do this activity? Have you done something like this before? Was this completely new?
One thing that was mentioned at our table is that it's easy not to think about certain identities when you're surrounded by people with that same identity. And also, I think in some ways we're sort of attracted to people with similar identities. Like we may implicitly feel more comfortable with them. Yeah. So, yeah.
One of the things that I did notice was that at work, a lot of my identities don't really interact with what I do. So when I was thinking about the question, which identity do you feel least comfortable with at work, I didn't really have anything because most of my work was just so divorced from who I am, besides like what I'm interested in, right? So, yeah.
Thanks, Carlos.
So I noticed that at work I did have some stuff that I noticed, like my age played a part in it, cause I would deal with a lot of people when they come in and stuff, and some of them they'll just be looking at me and stuff, and then after a while I'll be like, cause I know why they're looking at me. I'm like, I'm the new intern here or whatever. They'll be like, oh, I thought you were the manager's daughter. I thought you were coming. I'm like, no. And then that happens like a lot. Or I notice sometimes even my race will play a part in that, where it might not be even something bad, but I'll notice like some people would interact with me differently, if I'm making sense. But yeah, my age, I notice that like every day when I come in, or somebody is like bringing in trying to talk about something personal at my job or whatever. At first they'll be looking at me all until I tell them I'm an intern. Then they'll be like, oh, and then they're comfortable. Yeah.
All right, I'm gonna throw out a new question. So, are there any identities that you hadn't thought of before today, in terms of like what we've been through? And if you have, why do you think that might be something you haven't thought of before?
Something that I hadn't really thought about was tribal or indigenous affiliation, just because that doesn't really apply to me. So it's not something that I've ever really thought about.
I have a quick story for that one because I was telling this table that, so I've done this activity, quite a few times. And when I was in college, I had a similar thing. Like that's something that I had just never thought about before. It doesn't really apply to me. And then when I moved to Oklahoma for a little bit, and I was like living pretty close to a Native American reservation, and there it was like something that was commonly like discussed and talked about. And so in that situation, it was something that was a lot more forefront of my mind of, oh, that is something that I do think about. But again, now being back in Michigan where I am, it's again kind of something that I don't think about. So kind of, depends on where you are and who you're interacting with can also, influence how often you think about things.
One that I didn't really think about like that, or like that didn't really affect my decision making, was probably social class. Cause like I know how much money I make, and I know there are people that are like richer than me or poorer than me, but it's not something that I'm like continuously consciously thinking of that like, I don't know, bothers me or like is always in the back of my mind.
Yeah. And then one last question as we, did you have your hand up? Sorry, okay, thought I saw a hand. One last question as we wrap up. Why is it important to be aware of our social identities?
I think it's because that some social identities can give you specific privileges, or you might not have the same experiences as other people with different social identities. So I guess just being aware of the social identity that you possess and what the other person possesses in that situation, is just really important.
The other thing is being aware of how you identify either aids or hinders your maneuverability through society, and how you're able to get things done, and how it may or may not affect you like subconsciously.
Anyone else? Okay, I think that was a really important point. As you continue to, understand your identity, whether some of those change or stay the same, it's really important to understand how that impacts your experience, understand how that impacts you in the workplace, or, how other people may perceive you. Like the example over here about being treated differently from your age. When you notice those things and you see those things, you can better advocate for yourself, better speak up for yourself. And I also think it helps us, treat other people better when we think about our own identities and, like Kathleen was saying, being mindful of other identities that we don't have.
And I think kind of, a few weeks ago we were talking about, workplace ethics in terms of like microaggressions that happen in the workplace or workplace discrimination. And so, as you, move forward in your career and thinking about, those situations as well, and, social identities play a huge impact in those things as well. And so, to keep things in mind, and how you personally are navigating situations, but again, also how you're interacting with others. So, any concluding thoughts or reflections before we move forward? Tabitha.
So I just want to say to you all, first of all, I'm sorry, I have a comment about everything. But I've had many of these conversations in college classrooms, and this is every bit at that caliber. So you all are being so reflective and thoughtful on these topics, and just want to give y'all a hand, and just really impressed with you all.
Okay, so we are going to take some time to transition right into our workshops for the day. And so the first one, we have a guest leading our code switching workshop. If you'd like to attend that one, please stay in here. And you'll be able to learn about some of the things that are on the screen, like the definitions, how it's used, how it may impact your experience and others. And then the other workshop will be downstairs. What room is that? On the 4th floor? Yeah, on the 4th floor, you'll see it right when you get off the elevator. And that will be our Power and Privilege workshop led by us. You'll be able to learn more about the things on the screen, like what is privilege, finding out some of those definitions, how it impacts your life, and how it's used in the structures around you. And so gather your things, if you're staying here, then stay put. But gather your things if you're going to the 4th floor. And then we'll be in there for a little bit, and we'll return here for lunch.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. So I know I'm going to run a little bit over, so let's just get that out the way. So lunch is going to be postponed just a second, but we're going to have a fun, interactive time. So on the screen, you may notice it says social identity and code switching. So the reason it said that, because I wanted to do a quick recap of what we just did. So for today, the goal and agenda, you said the quick recap, just something that I want to share, a story I want to share, and see what you thought about what you did just earlier. We're going to talk about implicit bias, code switching, and some hidden rules that you may find in the workplace. So to start, why do you think we even started with social identities? Why do you think we started there? Anyone? Okay, I'm going to make you talk, so I'm just going to start with that. Anybody? Yes.
My name's Allison, and I think just to get a feel what we're speaking of, I guess, with identities. I'm not really sure.
So, why do you think that that's a key component, why we started with social identities as opposed to some other topics?
I guess to know how we identify. I don't know. I'm a little confused on this topic, so that's just my best guess.
Okay. No, good. There are no right or wrong answers, so thank you for sharing. Anyone else have an opinion of why we would start with our own social identities?
I guess knowing and being aware of your own social identity, and also for some people that's what people first see, so that's an important factor in this or something.
Perfect. I love it because it's an important aspect of who we are. Yes, I think we have someone over here. Thank you for that.
Because to respect others' identities, you first have to respect your own.
Yeah. Perfect. Thank you for that. So what I want to show you, how many people have seen this or something similar called the diversity wheel. Hands up high, I want to see. Okay, so if you have not seen this, I want to just kind of give an explanation of this. So when you're talking about, and there's many diversity wheels out there. So if you were to Google diversity wheels, they may be called other things, but this is just a basic one. So this one, if you look at this wheel, the inner components, age, race, gender, these are some things that you can probably see. Now this can be argued. If you look carefully what's in the center of the wheel, these are some things, when you first see me, you can probably tell what age group I'm in. Maybe or maybe not. You can probably tell my gender, my race, or have some idea of that. But when you look at the outer part of the ring, can you tell maybe my political affiliation? Can you tell my religion? Unless I'm wearing a cross or something around me or some symbolization of that, you may not be able to tell, correct? So when you look at the inner part of the diversity wheel, these are some things that, yes, you can see. Now, a lot of people argue this and say, wait a minute, how can I tell your sexual orientation? Well, you may not be able to. So I even argue some of these, and some of these wheels are changing throughout time. There's about 4 or 5 that I use in some of my practices that I do. So, but you can look and you can best guess or assume some of these things, right? On the outside, income. Income is when I heard somebody say that in the first session. When you think about income, you might have an idea what my income is, but you may not. Anyone can pretend to wear, fancy clothes or dress down for the day, and you never really know. Some of the most richest people don't dress as if they were making $1 million. That's going to be me one day. So, so when you're looking at this kind of goes deeper into some of those identities that you were discussing earlier. So this social identity profile sheet that you filled out, I filled one out prior. Little tidbit you may not know, you were going to do this spreadsheet with me as well. But then I found out, nope, I don't want to duplicate efforts. So what I did, I left this here because I wanted you to see how I filled it out. And I am further along in my career than a lot of you are. But notice when I said group membership, that's kind of how I filled it out. And you'll see the things that you're most aware of versus what you're not aware of. Now, for me, when I look at this, or when you look at it, what is something very visible that you see here? Again, no right or wrong answers. Yes?
I'm Allison again. Gender, sex, ethnicity, and sexual orientation.
Yeah, and what do those mean to me? Based on how I fill this out. This is actually how I see myself.
I'm not really sure.
Okay, so when you just did something like this, you'll look at the column where it says you are most aware of. What am I most aware of? Okay, so I think of myself, little caveat and a little back history, I work in IT. So when you think of people that work in IT, you may think of middle age, you may think of maybe in their early parts of their career, maybe white, maybe male, I don't know. But I kind of break that stereotype of what an IT person looks like. So when I'm in my profession, I think about my gender, because I'm a woman in IT. I think about my race, because I'm a black woman in IT. And actually, one thing that could be kind of, when it comes to the workplace, age can be a part of this as well. But I kind of hit the sweet spot when you're talking about IT, because that's about where we are in this area. But what do I think least about? You'll see that my sexual orientation, that's the thing I think least amount. You know why? Because I'm a part of what may be perceived as the dominant group, which is heterosexual. So when I think about things the most, these are the areas that I may find prejudice, or people may be biased towards me, because I think about it more, right? You know, I don't wake up and think about my social class. I may be able to, or maybe I should, but because I'm kind of like, I'm not really on either one of the spectrums. Body size, body image, these are things. And then what you don't see on here is other. There's some other characteristics that I may have that I may not think about, but definitely think about the top 3 that you see here. Now, notice that column that you filled out has the greatest impact, positive or negative. So I took time to do this, and guess what? I do this every 6 months. You know why? Because it changes. Right now, I'm an able-bodied person, but I could walk out here and get hit by a bus, and I'm not able-bodied anymore, right? You know, eventually that age category is going to change. I'm going to start thinking about age a lot more. You know, you may not think about age right now. That's good. But I may start to inch into that area where I'm thinking about age and retirement and things like that. So where you think about it most is probably where people have made you think about it. And when you think about it least, is probably where you have the most privilege. And then we all have privileges, okay? So this is why I take time to thoughtfully think of these things, because these are things that I have to think about, all right? So we're going to do an activity. So what we're going to do at your tables, hopefully there's at least, if you're at a table with at least 3 or 4 people, we're going to do this. So I'm going to mirror this first. So I want you to think about a time based on your social identity worksheet that you just did. Think of a time where you were especially proud of one of your identities. I'm going to give you an example because you're probably like, what do you mean by that? So for me, it was Black Lives Matter. That I was so proud the movement started. I was like, oh my God, wow, we need this. And I'm so proud that the young people took the baton and ran with it and created Black Lives Matter. So that was a time that my identity, I was proud to be an African American. A time that it was painful to be associated with one of my identities is something called colorism. In the Black community and some other colors, community of colors, there's something called colorism, where dark-skinned people versus light-skinned people. Maybe you've heard of this, maybe you haven't, but I'm going to go over it anyway. So the darker the skin, it's perceived that you have less advantages than someone that's of a lighter color. And again, it's not just African-American culture. This is Asian culture, this is Latinx culture, other cultures that have different skin tones. And it's painful to have that, you know? You know, when your best friend or your cousin, sister, whatever, is darker skin or lighter skin. So colorism is painful for my identity. And a stereotype about one of your identities that's not true. I got a whole bunch of these. But I guess one would be I work in IT, but another one is the music I grew up on. I grew up on all types of music, including rock and roll and punk rock. So when people look at me and I start talking about these groups of the 80s, they're like, you listen to what? And I'm like, yeah, I don't look like it, do I? So that's a stereotype that people of a certain color, race, age have to do or fit in a box. I am not in a box.
I didn't get that. Could you try again?
No, that was Siri talking. I am so sorry. So on your tables, again, if you're seated where it looks like most tables are okay, but if you're by yourself or only 2 people at a table, please join another table briefly, I ask. And we're going to take about 7 and 10 minutes to go over these 3 things. And I want everyone to talk, everyone to get a chance. That's why we're saying 7 to 10 minutes. So please, time that you were proud of one of your identities, painful, and a stereotype that you are not a part of. So go ahead and take 7 or 10, and I'll be coming around. All right, so I hear a lot of good conversation. I appreciate that. This is the hard part for me, is stopping conversation, because I love to talk and I love to hear. That's where the learning happens. So is there any table or any particular person that wishes to share? You do not have to share, and please share yourself, not what someone else said. So can I get a couple volunteers? Yes.
So we all agreed at the table for like a time that it was painful to be associated with one of your identities. We said when like the women's rights thing came up, and then it was just like, it was painful for us for all that to be shut down, like you're stopping our rights, and then that was like a major thing. And then I also said for a stereotype about one of your identities, like one of the stereotypes that Christians can't like the same gender and all that, like you're going to tell somebody their religion because of what they like. And
Great. Thank you so much for sharing. I didn't catch your name.
My name is Kennedy.
Kennedy, thank you for sharing. I really appreciate that. Anyone else? Yes, Malcolm.
Hello. What?
I'm sorry.
Oh.
I just happened to know your name. Go ahead.
Hello. My name is Malcolm. Something that I was proud of was to be Black. When Black Panther came out, I was really excited to have like a Black superhero to look up to, and for the next generations to have a Black superhero. So yeah.
Thank you for sharing, Malcolm. Anyone else?
I'm Allison again.
Hi, Allison.
And something that I feel like that's painful about my identities is my disability, because I have autism. So some people don't realize I have autism, but the fact that I was born with it, I kind of feel like sometimes I'd be like, oh, I have autism. Why don't I get like free privilege or something? I don't know, but I feel like this disability might be kind of painful to talk about.
Yes. And thank you for sharing, because there are known visible and non-visible. And I'm only here for an hour, but I can definitely go into a lot more. So I appreciate your honesty and for sharing. Is there anyone? I'll take one more. Yes.
So a time when I was especially proud of one of my identities, of course, I'm always proud to be a black woman. But whenever I go into stores, especially Target, that's my favorite spot, when I see black woman founded things, like especially during like Black History Month, like going in there and purchasing things, or like seeing their stuff on the shelves throughout like 365, not just during Black History Month. It's like, okay, Target, I'm gonna be with you all the time.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Oh, yep. One more.
Hi, my name is Haley, and I have ADHD. And in the past, ADHD wasn't a thing. It was just, you're stupid. I'm not stupid. I'm smart. I got A's and B's all class. I have 3.5. Yeah, it's not true.
Right. Of course not, but ignorance is real. Okay? Thank you for sharing that. So, how did you like that activity? Have you ever done an activity like that before? Anything like that? So it goes back to your social identities. You have to kind of lean into your own before you can help others. And this is a huge topic, and I'm very appreciative that you're getting like chunk sizes of this. So let's go ahead and go on to, we're going to kind of shift gears a little bit away from social identity to something called explicit bias. I'm going to ask for one volunteer to read this out loud for me, please. I would say I give you candy, but I don't have any. Okay, yes. If I can find some, I'll get you some candy.
My name is Haley. Defining explicit bias. Explicit bias is what's happening when, despite our best intentions and without our awareness, stereotypes and assumptions about different social identities creep into our minds and affect our actions.
Yes, thank you. So every one of you probably has a different opinion of what was just read, okay? So the one thing about bias, we all have bias. Let's just set that straight. I teach a whole 3-hour class in bias, and something about bias, people are like, I am not biased. Yes, you have some biases, and they can be mitigated. You can kind of control some of them, but at the end of the day, you have biases. And we just kind of want to talk about what that looks like at work. So there's these hidden rules at work. Like if you work hard, you're going to get a promotion. Yeah, you might. But there's these other hidden rules, like you may have to, like, I'll tell you one that's happening in my job, is that you have to, if you want a promotion, you have to do the work for 6 months. Actually do the work, which means you're doing your regular job and the job that you want for 6 months before you even get that position. Okay? So, wow. And then I might not get that position after I've done that work for six months or so, leaning into both roles, having to do them both well to show that I can do the job that I want. And then I may get passed over anyway. So when you talk about these hidden rules at work, the difference between what is spoken and the hidden rule. So the spoken rule is that we value work-life balance. The hidden rule is you have to work from 8 o'clock in the morning to 8 o'clock at night. But we do value, whenever you can fit it in on your own time, work-life balance. What does that really mean? So, it's like, oh, of course, we understand and we empathize with you. But they don't give you accommodations that you may need if you have a disability, whether visible or non-visible. So these are things that you're going to be able to see. Unfortunately, that's kind of what the world is built on. And then there's these other rules that the rules are for everyone. Everyone has to apply to these rules. Yeah. Imagine this scenario. Your best friend is the director, and you happen to get this job in her area. Well, does the rules apply for everyone? No, I'm her best friend. I can do whatever I want. I got the job. And it can be based on race. It can be based on colorism. It can be based on abilities, sexual orientation, you name it. The rules are not the same for everyone. Where I work, I can wear jeans. I work from home right now, but I could wear jeans. But some people don't wear jeans because they know there's an unhidden rule that says, well, if you dress up a little bit more, you might get that promotion. Or you may be, get opportunities. Just because you can wear jeans doesn't mean you should. Okay? So there's all these hidden rules that come up. So I want to look at some more. We're going to do some more group work. I'm all about interactivities and stuff. So at your tables, what we're going to do, we're going to have two scenarios, scenario 1 and scenario 2. And I'm going to put scenario 1. We're only going to take about maybe 5-10 minutes here as well. And we're going to talk about each scenario. So scenario 1 is with Shauna. And what we're going to do is read what is on the screen. And on screen 2, you're going to have, screen 2 is going to be Jack. So let's do table 1, or scenario 1 can be these 4 tables. Okay, wait a minute. How am I going to do this? So this side of the room and that back table takes scenario 1. Okay? Maybe I should have you take scenario 2 because you're on this side. Correction. You guys take scenario 2. You can take scenario 1. The middle table, you can pick. I'm going to give you the opportunity to pick which one you want, scenario 1 or 2. We're going to read at your tables, and you're going to come up with some sort of what you're going to do, and I'll just go back and repeat that. So what you're going to be looking at in these scenarios, you're going to read each scenarios and select one person from each group is going to kind of process out. You're going to take about 5 minutes, and I want you to see what comes up as far as implicit bias is concerned. So you're going to pick one person at your table to kind of process out. We may not get to all the tables, but at least have one person available so you can see what you came up with as it relates to implicit bias. Does that make sense? Okay. I'll give you about 5-10 minutes because you got to read it first, process it, talk amongst yourself, table, have one person be the note taker, whatever, process out. I may call on random people and ask who your note taker is at that particular table. Got it? Okay. All right. Get to reading. One on the, yes, we have a question. Yes. So you're looking for implicit bias, kind of read it and kind of think through what they're saying in this and whatever you come up with. So I don't want to give you the answers. I just want to see what you come up with, kind of. So again, this side of the room 1, this side of the room 2, the middle table gets to pick. Oh, I'm sorry. Scenario 2, sorry. Okay. If you have any questions, let me know. All right, let's get to some good discussions. So I'm not going to pick on a table. I'm going to ask for a volunteer first. So any table would like to volunteer? Who was the note taker? We'll start with volunteers. I love this. Her hand was like, yes. Thank you. And what did you pick, by the way? Did you pick scenario 1 or 2?
We did scenario 1, but when we got a lot of it done, we went to scenario 2.
Perfect.
So
overachiever. I love that. Thank you. I swear I need candy. I should have brought candy. Sorry.
Yeah. So with scenario 1, do I go through what's explicit, what's implicit?
Just what came up for you when you read scenario 1. So you could just give like the high level. That's fine.
Oh, yeah. We can see Dave behaves differently with Shauna in comparison to her other coworkers. He explicitly states it's because of experience, but we also know that it also could likely be because gender, and she's also younger than them. And she has less status than Dave, who is a senior ranking man. And for Jack, the explicit is that his boss explicitly said Jack can relate to the urban population, and it's assumed because he is a minority. And he's also the only gay person, which also marginalizes him further.
Mm-hmm. Great. Thank you. Thank you for that. Yes. So these are really heavy-hitting scenarios. I'll ask for one more volunteer. I thought I saw a hand in the back behind the pole there. Thank you.
My name is Autumn, and so for scenario 2, the boss's bias had them like hire people who are not people of color and who are not LGBTQ. And then the boss assumed that that Jack was, I guess, urban, whatever that means for him, because he's not white. And yeah.
Okay, great. All right, so in essence of time, I'm going to go ahead and move on unless someone else wants to share. If you like to share, that's fine. If not, we'll go ahead and move on. Okay, so I like to give scenarios too because some of these are real life scenarios. A lot of them are, I like to tell a lot of stories when I present too because it hits home. These scenarios is a part of doing that. So let's go ahead and move on. Debriefing implicit bias. So we kind of already did this. What did your group talk about? You know, the spoken rules and the hidden rules. Now that part we did not go over. Were there any additional hidden rules that weren't already said that you want to add, that you came up with? Anyone? Any additional ones that were not spoken about at those two tables? Okay, yeah. Yes.
So in the second scenario, the boss says we strive for diversity, but the hidden rule is what they consider to be diversity is likely only a few people of color.
Right, right. I'm glad you picked up on that. Yes, thank you for sharing that. Yes.
Hi, Malcolm again. Just to add to that, that's what we call like tokenism. So basically just like adding a few people of color or people from like the LGBTQ plus community just to like check off the quota and, you know, so they can be considered diverse.
Exactly. Thank you for sharing that, Malcolm. Yeah. All right. So here are the hidden rules. For one, we value teamwork and honest feedback as the spoken rule. That's what's spoken. The hidden rule is you can voice your opinion, but only the people at the top get to be listened to. You've seen this around, I'm sure. It's like everyone has an opinion. And then all of a sudden, the executive director said and the manager said, and you're like, well, wait a minute, the janitor had an opinion too, but you didn't listen to his opinion. And then scenario 2 with Jack. The spoken rule, we offer an equal opportunity regardless of gender, ethnicity, race, sexual preference, or age. You'll see that on a lot of resumes or a lot of job descriptions, actually. And I laugh at that. Because when I walk into the interview, not all the time, maybe only 2%, but sometimes it's like, tell you a quick story. I was working at an internship years ago, and I was working for the Detroit News, a Detroit Free Press, you know, like when they had papers actually thrown on your doors. And I was in customer service at that time. And this man was ranting about, he used a derogatory term about black people. And he didn't realize he was talking to a black person. And when I mentioned it, he says, well, you don't sound black. And I'm listening to this, and I'm in customer service, so I had to be polite to a certain extent. I couldn't hang up on the person. So he's ranting about a group of people that is my social identity. So imagine how painful that was. So I just interjected that story. I got many more where those came from. Anyway, the hidden rule here is if you're a white man, you have the best chances of getting promoted or paid more. And we don't incorporate diversity in our hiring practices. That's the hidden rule. But I always say, don't let that bother you. Just go for it. Because you know who you are, and you have to let that show through. Don't let that hold you back. Then the perceptions or assumptions versus reality. Assumptions that all black college students are athletes. Now, this one really bugs me. Because I've heard this in passing, like, oh, you must be, athlete, you're built a certain way. You're built like a swimmer, or you're built like whatever. I've heard that. I'm thinking, well, wait a minute. What does that do to the person you're telling that to? It may be a compliment in their head, but that can also be teetering on some other things like microaggressions. Natural hair and perceptions of professionalism. Okay. I don't care where you work. Hopefully that's changing, but people see you as a whole package, whatever that looks like. So hopefully that is changing with some of the new laws that we have in place, but who knows? Company culture around budgets and spending. What this kind of means is, do the same projects get funded, or ERG programs, which are special groups, do they get funded like other programs get funded? So if you have a group that's, let's say, Latinx, do they get the same funding model that maybe another group gets? All right. So what hidden rules have you encountered? Unless you want to talk about this, I'm going to go on and move fast forward. But if you want to share a story, please, this is the opportunity to do so. Anybody have a story they wish to share as it relates to this? You're not on the spot. You don't have to share it. If not, I'm counting down. Okay. All right. So code switching. So what is code switching? Code switching, when we talked about those social identities, and we talked about the identity wheel, the diversity wheel, are there identities you feel like you have to downplay or hide in certain spaces? So that's kind of what code switching is, where you can't feel like you can bring your authentic self to the workplace or to school or whatever it is. So even though you act a certain way at home, you feel like you have to act a certain way at work. Now, a lot of people say, well, that's just being professional. I'm like, it may be for some, but for others, you have to literally code switch. And I developed a whole course around what code switching is and what this really means. Have you ever felt uncomfortable and you don't know why, but you feel like, you feel uptight and your shoulders hurt when you get home because you had to play a role maybe at work or school? You had to be someone that's not authentically yourself. You're probably code switching. You're having to fit into this box, that whatever box that looks like, whether, again, because you're in a conference, you're in a session, or whatever. So what is code switching from a diversity perspective? It's a practice of changing one's language or dialect. That's what code switching initially was just for. But now it kind of evolved to adjusting your appearance or behavior expression to kind of, what I like to say, which is not here, pacify the dominant group. So I may feel that I have to speak a certain way. Now, this is the way I talk all the time, actually. So I don't feel like I'm code switching because I don't have to code switch. This is how I would talk if I was at a friend's house. But there are other people that may feel that, okay, I have to dress a certain way, I have to articulate a certain way, I have to do something in order to get a promotion, get the job, get to be in the inner circle, whatever that looks like. So when you're talking about code switching, there's a whole component to this. It's about fitting into what you need to fit into. So I need to run this video. Can I do it from here? Oh, okay. Perfect. Thank you. I'm going to show you a quick video. Please listen.
Anyway, as always, I want to close on a more serious note. You know, I often joke about tensions between me and the press, but honestly, what they say doesn't bother me. I understand we've got an adversarial system. I'm a mellow sort of guy. And that's why I invited Luther, my anger translator, to join me here tonight. Your lily white butts. In our fast-changing world, traditions like the White House Correspondents' Dinner are important. I mean, really? What is this dinner? And why am I required to come to it? Jeb Bush, do you really want to do this? Because despite our differences, we count on the press to shed light on the most important issues of the day. And we can count on Fox News to terrify old white people with some nonsense. Sharia law is coming to Cleveland, run for the damn hills. Y'all's ridiculous. We won't always see eye to eye. Oh, and CNN, thank you so much for the wall-to-wall Ebola coverage. For 2 whole weeks, we were one step away from the Walking Dead. And then you all got up and just moved on to the next thing. That was awesome. Oh, and by the way, just but I still deeply appreciate the work that you do.
Y'all remember when I had that big old hole in the bottom of the Gulf of Mexico, and then I plugged it? Remember that? Which Obama's Katrina was that one? Was that 19 or was it 20? Because I can't remember.
Protecting our democracy is more important than ever. For example, the Supreme Court ruled that the donor who gave Ted Cruz $6 million was just exercising free speech.
Yeah, it's the kind of speech like this. I just wasted $6 million.
And it's not just Republicans. Hillary will have to raise huge sums of money too.
Oh, yeah. She gonna get that money. She gonna get all the money. Khaleesi is coming to Westeros. Watch out.
So I'm not going to play the whole video. So you kind of get the point that humor is good actually in educating people as well. So what was the takeaway from that video? And you can always download it later and watch it.
Obama has amazing poker face. He didn't laugh at all, or how?
Well, what was the takeaway, though? What were they trying to get to in that point?
My takeaway from that whole thing was that what somebody's saying isn't what they necessarily believe.
Okay. Yep. Anyone else?
I would kind of say back to like how you said something like how you have to change your tone or something and all that. He's like doing the professional, how he has to be put out, but really it's like what the other dude is saying in there.
Right. Because if okay, let me ask you this, and not just you, all of you, what would happen if he did?
Then it'll be put out as he is being, for one, unprofessional, and then it'll be looked at as maybe it might even go into his race or something because he was like the first black and then it'll be like, oh, and he's sitting over here doing this and that. That's not cool. It's because blah, blah, blah. It'll be out of whole context and it will be unprofessional.
Exactly. It would go down a whole nother rabbit hole. I think I saw a hand up at this table. Same thing, yeah. Because unfortunately, in some races, gender, religion, when one or two people make a mistake, they look at the entire religion or the entire gender or the entire race as making a mistake. So if President Obama made a mistake, he was walking on eggshells. And a lot of us feel that we have to walk on eggshells because of the situation, whatever that situation looks like. So I'm going to go ahead. And so why do we code switch? Because I've had a lot of conversations about this. Should I code switch? Should I not? I don't feel I should. So it happens involuntarily. Sometimes we just do it. We're like, oh. We see people of the dominant group, whatever that is. It doesn't have to be race. It can be other things. We see a dominant group, and we don't fit that mold. So we have to jump into the box. And we have to kind of cookie cut and walk the line. I don't do that. I don't feel I do that. I probably do. But we want to fit in. We want to be a part of that group, whatever group that is. We want to make sure that people aren't looking at us and like saying, well, what's wrong with them? It's about survival. It's a survival technique sometimes. When everyone else is doing the same thing and you are on the outskirts, you may have to get in where you fit in, so to speak. But you may have to, again, change your perception on what's happening and change your dialect, the way that you dress, you act, you speak, all of that. It allows for privacy. Maybe you don't want to bring your authentic self to work because your authentic self, you may think that people may not accept you for whatever reason that is. Blending in to learn and then making the change. So you're kind of blending in to see what the masses think and you want to kind of tote that line. And then you get to learn, like, okay, well, maybe I need to act this way if I want to get that promotion because everyone is doing this. Everyone's working 12 hours, so I guess I have to do that too. that might not be technically deep into code switching, but that's a piece or a component possibly of it. And to better convey a thought or express ourselves, maybe we can express ourselves better if we conform. So, in essence of time, this is a video, and I will only show a little bit of this video. I don't want to show all of this one as well because I want to have more time for interaction. So what I'm going to do, we're just going to take a peek at this video, and then we're going to have a short discussion, and then we're going to wrap up here.
Perhaps in my case, that unintentional education saved my life.
Okay, wait a minute, hold on.
Code switching as a concept is really interesting. By definition, it's what happens when people who speak multiple languages alternate between two or more, oftentimes within the same phrase or sentence. In a more colloquial sense, code switching is what happens when people reflexively or subtly change the way they express themselves. So for someone like me, and I'm sure many of you all here, I thought up until about 4th grade that y'all was the correct contraction for you all. It was only after some point around 9 or 10 that I learned that you all was the correct way to address a group of people, and that I should absolutely use you all, not y'all, when addressing important people and situations. As our world continues to be connected through technology of all sorts, apps and the Internet of Things and artificial intelligence, I guess code switching makes a lot of sense as people from different backgrounds continue to come into close contact with one another. But when we look more closely at code switching and who's expected to make the switch, we discover a hidden reality. And that reality is that the expectation of code switching threatens true diversity. My first day of 3rd grade was at a new school, as I had recently been accepted to the gifted program, which meant that I would be bused from my neighborhood school of West Side to Tomoka in the next city over. The year was 1992, and so on the first day of class, I proudly donned my favorite Jodeci pleather new boots and my cross-color short set. To say that I stuck out like a sore thumb would be a grave understatement. My new classmates were in polite pastels and ribbons and bows and Kids Gap and limited to fashions. I knew immediately that if I was going to fit in and make friends, I would have to change more than just a few things. So over the course of the next few years, I learned acutely how to do just that. I stopped wearing my Jodeci boots. I started choosing softer colors as opposed to the bright hip-hop colors and fashions that I had chosen previously. I started listening to Green Day, and I eventually learned how to act like my new classmates and eventual friends. Most importantly, though, I learned how to align myself not just so that I fit in, but so that I was culturally compatible. And I didn't know it.
Okay. So again, please watch the whole, this one is amazing. I couldn't have said it better myself, but notice how she said what she had to do just to fit in that one. And she gives a lot of examples, by the way, to that. So yes, I was just going to ask if you had some questions. Chandra author? Yeah, yes. She's remarkable. There's actually a couple of other TED Talks that she's done. So, in essence of time, and to make sure that we get out of here, I mean, I started a little bit late, so I'm just mindful of time, always mindful. Any questions, last thoughts, anything that you want to share? Don't be shy now. Okay. I'm not hearing anything. No? All right. Well, thank you so very much. Is lunch going to be served, or do I need to make any announcements? Am I good? No, can we get a round of applause, please? Okay. Thank you very much.
Y'all can stay put. We'll get ready for lunch once the other group rejoins us.
I ended too early?
I actually do have a quick announcement, and I'll repeat it once the others join us as well. If you guys are interested or know anyone that would be interested in speaking at our end of summer celebration, you're welcome to let one of us know. Or if you want more information, we'll be glad to let you know about that. So